Hey guys, today I'm going to show you how to make this. This is a Nintendo Switch Games Analysis Dashboard. I downloaded this data from Kaggle. I'm a huge Nintendo fan, and I'm going to show you how to build every single component of this dashboard today. Just a quick summary of what this does. It gathers all of this review data that was published on Kaggle.com, and it gives you releases by quarter, so the number of Switch games that have been published since the inception of the Nintendo Switch. We've got strongest performers and weakest performers. If you click on these games, you can see a new picture take its place to show the actual game that you clicked on, as well as some relevant info. And then we also have the best publishers versus the worst publishers. So I'm going to show you how to build all of that in this tutorial. Now, this data, as I mentioned, comes from a website called Kaggle.com. So Kaggle.com is an excellent resource for free data. You can go on their website and there's just tons of data sets available. The one that I'm using is called Nintendo Switch Games Reviews, and it has things like the title of the game, the date it was published, the actual review that was written up, like the whole narrative of the review that was written up, and like the concluding piece of that review is also in a separate column. We have the number of votes, just tons of information about the quality of these games that they are released, and it pulls all of that from this website called Nintendo Life, which has a lot of information about these games, how well the critics liked the game, how many people voted for that particular game. So we're going to pull all of that information by downloading that data set. So I'm downloading it now, and I'm going to open this up. Now let me see here. We've got, why do I have two of these? Okay, I'm going to close this one. I'm going to expand this. Now, first we're going to take a look at our data set before we load it into Tableau. I can already tell you, having worked with this in advance, that there's some cleaning that we're going to need to do before we can get to the fun part. So feel free to skip ahead if you want to, leave all that boring stuff behind. But I'm going to expand this out, and let's see what we've got here. So there, you'll notice right away that in the narrative of the review that was written, there's all these gibberish characters. Like, for example, whenever you see the word Pokemon, it has this A with a tilde or a tilde or whatever, however you pronounce that. So that's one character that we're going to want to replace. So I'm just going to copy that. I'm going to do Control F, and then I'm going to replace that with an E. I'm not going to look for the E with the accent over the top because I'm too lazy to do that right now. So that was 412 replacements. Let's see. So then I actually wrote this down in advance. There's others that we're going to want to replace. There's going to be this one here, and I'm going to highlight that, and I'm going to, okay, so no, I'm going to highlight this thing right here, and I'm going to replace that with an apostrophe. All right, so replace all of those. We made 17,892 replacements. I think that's pretty much good enough for now. There's also this one right here. Now, you might be thinking, how do I know how to replace these weird characters with a particular other character or letter or whatever? Well, what I did was I went into Google and I just copied this, and I went to like Nintendo Life, and I copied the whole thing and pasted it in. And okay, error 400, bad request. Okay, let's do this a different way. I'm going to look up this thing right here. No, this one right here, where we saw that weird character. That's called Demon Slayer. All right, Demon Slayer. So I'm going to go into Google. Demon Slayer Switch Nintendo Life. So it's this game here. I'm going to find the exact point where it has that character. So where was that? So there's another weird character here, but there's one in particular that I wanted to point out. All right, well, whatever. I'm just going to use this one here. Media franchises in existence. Okay, media franchises in existence. So you can see as soon as I type that in that there's this weird hyphen character here. So we can infer from context that that thing right there should be a hyphen. Now, why is our data set showing all these weird characters? I'm not really sure, but it probably has something to do with the web scraper that was used, or the script to scrape all this data. So I'm going to replace that with a hyphen. Okay, that made 1,000 replacements. There's more stuff like this one here, but you know, at this point I don't really care. This should be good enough. We've taken care of maybe 50 or 60% of the corrections that need to be made, but I'm not going to make a full hour-long video on trying to get this super squeaky clean. So let's move on to the next part of this. Now, what you'll notice also about this, or what you might notice, is that this release date, it's already formatted in really proper narrative way, like 22nd of September 2022. Tableau is not necessarily going to like that. It's going to look at that and it's going to maybe have some problems with that, as we'll see later on, and we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But just something to keep in mind as we proceed for the through the tutorial. Okay, so what else do we need to do? One thing that you'll also notice about this data set, if you scroll all the way to the right here, and if you go to number of votes, I'm going to click data, I'm going to go to filter, I'm going to sort this in the largest to smallest order. For some of the really critically acclaimed games, or the games that have been reviewed quite often, you'll notice that some of them are in the thousands, and they have this weird space at the 1,000th place. We're going to want to get rid of that, okay, because that's going to mess everything up when we're trying to build this dashboard. So just go ahead and remove that. We'll go through all of these. It's probably a faster way to do this, but this is the most efficient, expedient way I could think of without having to research the proper function for this. All right, so let's just do that. All right, I think we have just about done everything we can for this without spending hours on it. So I'm gonna save this someplace easy to access. I'm gonna call this Switch Games Data. All right, so it's Switch Games Data. I'm gonna save that to my desktop. And you know, I'm not too crazy about this CSV format, so I'm gonna save this actually as an Excel file. So let's do that. Okay, I think we're ready to proceed to Tableau. So I'm going to go back in here. I'm gonna open up a new Tableau file. This is Tableau Public that I'm using. You can get Tableau Public for free on their website. So the first thing we do is we click on Data Source. So once we get to Data Source, we're gonna open, actually we're gonna go to Microsoft Excel here. I'm gonna retrieve that data set. And then let's finish up the cleaning of the data. So we did the cleaning of the data in the Excel backend of this. There's one more thing that we've got to do that I need to show you. So if I go to pull the title of the video game, and then I pull the release date, so far this is looking fine. We see the release date for all of these, but it's not in a date format that Tableau recognizes yet. So I'll show you what happens when we try to force this to become a date. I'm going to create a duplicate of this. I'm going to edit this to just say date. All right. I've duplicated that. Now I have to actually change this to date. And then once I do that, you'll notice that there's this big formula that appears. So I'll show you what that means in a second. So I've pulled that duplicate field of the date that I've converted into an actual date format. And you can see on the left, we now have the string or the column that's consisting of letters and words and numbers. That's all that Tableau sees for that column, just letters and words and numbers. It doesn't actually recognize that as a date. So when I duplicated this and I right-clicked and I said convert or change the data type to date, it only works sometimes, okay? It only works sometimes because, sorry, let me just fix that there, because it's trying to figure this out on its own, how to parse those dates. So let's dissect this a little bit and see how that's looking. So once I make this more readable here, what Tableau is doing when it tries to convert to a date and it doesn't immediately recognize that date format, it's putting in these date parsers, okay? So what we need to do is we need to help it finish this formula here, or this calculation. It will work right now for anywhere where it says TH next to the day. It's also working for anything that has ST. So TH and ST, but not like the 3rd or the 23rd of the month. So that part doesn't work. And this bottom part of this formula doesn't contribute anything. For some reason, it's looking to the month of November. That doesn't really contribute anything. But let me actually go back a step. I need to keep this part that says end. And I'm going to copy and paste this. And so this part works, but the parts where it says RD, like the 3rd of the month, or the part that says ND, like the 2nd of the month, or the 22nd of the month, those parts are not working. So let's put in RD right here, and then RD, let's see here, RD there, and an RD there, and then ND here, and an ND here. Let's see what happens. Okay, so now you'll notice that those things that were formerly null, those dates that were formerly null, are now filled in with the proper date. Except for this one, there are two dates in this whole data set that didn't work because it was just the year, but I'm not going to bother with those because they're pretty minor entries. Bubble Bobble for friends, it's not really a big game. If this were a project that I were working on for my boss at a company, I would certainly spend the time to fix that, but this is just a quick little demo that I'm doing, so I'm not going to bother with these really minor details here. This should be good enough for now. I think at this point we are ready to move on to actually visualizing some of this stuff and getting this stuff ready for the dashboard. So let's clear this. And I'm going to start off by creating my dashboard, all right? So let's make this a fixed size. Once we build that dashboard, I'll make that a fixed size of desktop browser. I'm going to start off by looking at this thing here that I built. And we've got this Nintendo Switch Games Analysis title. So that's easy enough. I'm going to go back here. I'm going to select this text option, Nintendo Switch Games Analysis. I like Tableau Medium a lot, so I'm going to use that font here. Whoops, I need to highlight that first. Tableau Medium. Okay, there we go. And then 24 bold, going to be center there. All right, and then we need to make this have a gray sort of background. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually look at a Nintendo Switch palette. You can easily get this by just Googling Nintendo Switch palette HTML. The HTML is going to be the important part because these are codes that we can actually put into Tableau to get consistent colors as we're coloring this dashboard. I'm going to use this one here, the 6A6367. All right, so I'm going to click on this layout, background, more colors. I'm going to type 6A6367. Now, if you want to easily access this as you're going through this dashboard, once you punch in that HTML, you can left click on this color, and then I'm just going to pull that in right there, and now I can access that pretty easily. So that looks pretty good. I'm going to push that up a little bit. All right, and then, yeah, that looks good. So now I'm going to fill in this background with another color. I'm going to make that maybe a light gray just to keep things neutral. Let's see how we're doing on this dashboard. Okay, so what I did next was I pulled in this PNG, this image of the Nintendo Switch, and that has a transparent background so that it blends in with the rest of the dashboard. There's no irregular borders there. I found that by going to Google and just typing in like Nintendo Switch PNG transparent or something like that. And there should be a number of these that are immediately accessible. I think I found mine at PNG Find or one of these websites gave me that image that I put onto my dashboard. I will put this link to the to this dashboard on Tableau Public. I'll put that in the description below so that you can access all the stuff that you need to follow along with this tutorial. That being said, I'm going to go to image, and I'm going to pick out that image that I had. And I guess it's from the website PNG Egg, actually. I'm going to fit the image and center it. And there it is. So it looks pretty good. I'm going to push that up a little bit. That's too much, so I'll drag this down. Okay, so we've got the basic building blocks in place, and now we can start building each of these little visualizations that we're going to embed into the dashboard. All right, so first what we want to do is we want to build this releases by quarter visualization. So for that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull in my date, and I'm going to make that a quarter. It's going to be a continuous quarter, so I'm going to use this one down below, which is for the continuous function. I'm going to flip this so it's horizontal. And now what we need to do is we need to make this count the number of titles for the Nintendo Switch. So we've got the count there, but we don't want it to be a line graph. We want it to be a bar graph. I suppose you could do a line graph if you wanted, but I just think it looks better this way. Now, I like to have a little gap in between these bars, so I'm actually going to convert this to a discrete. We can get rid of these nulls here because there's only 2 data points in that whole data set. And what I like to do is I like to color in these bars with some kind of gradient. So we'll take the count of the titles. I held down the control key here, so hold down the control key, drag that to color. And what that does is it keeps this in place rather than making it disappear. It creates a duplicate of itself. I dragged it onto color, and that duplicate that was dragged onto the color, it creates this gradient effect. But that gradient effect isn't quite what I want. I want this gradient effect to reflect that blue color in that Joy-Con. You got the blue and red Joy-Cons on the Nintendo Switch, so I want to emulate that in this graph. So I'm going to click on color. I'm going to go to custom sequential. I'm going to click on this color here, and I've already programmed in that color that I was showing you earlier, this 06BADD. So I'm just going to use that, and that's this one here. And there you go. So now it's looking pretty good, more switch-like, so to speak. Let's go ahead and get rid of this axis here. I'm going to right-click and then remove that header. I'm going to unclick the option that says Show Header, and I'm doing that because I'm going to label these. So I'm going to hold down the Control key again, and I'm going to label this. Now you can see the actual numbers, so we don't even need the axis anymore. I'm going to right-click here and hide the field labels. Okay, so now we got to come up with a title for this. This is called Releases by a Quarter. So I'm going to call that Releases by a Quarter. Now this is going to be Tableau Medium. I keep doing this. So Tableau Medium Releases by a Quarter. I'm going to make that sort of a medium gray right over here. I'm going to make this a bold color. I'm going to right click and I'm going to try and format this so that it has that gray that we're using in the dashboard. We've got these weird grid lines that we don't really need. So let's format this again. You can get rid of the grid lines here by going to rows and then none. Now I got to find the axis ruler. So I think it's in the same section here. That gets rid of the axis here. Go to columns, and then we'll remove the axis for this thing here, or that's the axis ticks. We need the rulers. That gets rid of that. If you squint really hard, you can see these dotted lines here. What that is that's the 0 lines. So I'm going to go to rows, and I'm going to remove the 0 lines, and then that should be completely eliminated now. So let's see how that's coming along. I'm going to pull in this sheet up here. I'm gonna drag that up a little bit. This is a little bit too big. I might make that like 9 maybe. Releases by quarter, maybe 10. Size 10 for the font. Now these dates here are getting a little, they're competing for space, so they're not all showing up. So I'm going to format that. And so I right click, I format. Here I'm going to go down to custom, and I'm going to do Q to show the first, or to show the quarter number. I'm going to put in a double quotes uppercase Q. So that now says the number and then the letter Q. And then a dash, and then year, and that should show me the combination of the quarter and the 2-digit year in a really concise way. And we might not even need the hyphen here, so I'll get rid of that. And I think that looks pretty clean. I think that's looking pretty good at this point. We should get rid of this legend here because it doesn't really contribute much. We'll push this back up. All right, so that's looking quite nice. Okay, so now we need to build in the strongest and weakest performers of the Nintendo Switch like we have here. So I'm gonna do that next. So let's jump in and build a new sheet that we're gonna drag onto the visualization. So I'm gonna call this strongest performers. All right, so strongest performers. Now let's pull in the title, and I'm going to pull in the rating. I'm going to sort this in descending order. Now if you're a video gamer like me and you play a lot of Nintendo games or Switch games, you're probably going to notice right away that there's some weird titles here that you probably wouldn't expect. Like Wreckfest, I've never heard of Wreckfest. Let's take a look at that. I don't know what this is. It looks like some kind of demolition derby kind of game or something. You know, it might be a fantastic game, but I'm kind of skeptical that this is a game that's really critically acclaimed and has a ton of reviews and has been thoroughly tested. So let's take a look at what would happen if we pulled in the number of views. We only have 7 votes for this game, so I don't know if it's necessarily among the greatest Switch games, just because it might be more of an outlier. So to take care of those outliers, what I'm going to do is I'm going to require that we have at least 200 votes for these games to make sure that they are thoroughly reviewed, that we're talking about games that could be critically acclaimed and recognized by a ton of people as being a great game. So I'm going to make this require that we have at least 200 votes before we can consider any game as being in this top list here. Okay, so now this list looks a little bit more accurate. It looks more like I would expect. We have Legend of Zelda right at the top, Xenoblade Chronicles, Metroid Dread, Super Smash Bros. These are all fantastic games. All right, so next what we want to do is we want to rank this in the top, we want to have the top X games, and I'm going to say top 10. So to do that, I'm going to hold down the control key. I'm going to take this rating number that we have, I'm going to convert that to discrete, and then I'm going to add a table calculation here. And what this is going to do is it's going to go down that list. We're going to get a rank. Right now it's set to a competition ranking. What that means is that it's looking at these rankings by it's ranking things by the rating. So Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is number 1, but then you've got 9.3. 9.3 is the next ratings for the next 2 games. Metroid Dread and Xenoblade Chronicles share that spotlight for second place, so they both get second place. Then, because there's 3 games before it, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate gets 4th place and shares that with Super Mario Odyssey, and so on. I'm going to try and simplify things by just making this unique and not allowing these games to share a place, because that will complicate this top 10 list that I want to get later on. You might get 12 games or 13 games pulled in there because of this whole tying factor. So I don't want that. I'm just going to make it clean and simple and just give it a unique rating, or a unique ranking. Okay, and now that that's built, I'm going to go ahead and just pull this in, and it's going to be stored as a calculation. Okay, so now I'll just call this ranking. Right, so I'll pull that out. I'm going to bring this up, and I'm going to say that this can be no more than 10. And now it should be pulling in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. The top 10 games that we have so far reviewed by Nintendo Life for the Nintendo Switch. So that's looking pretty good. I need to give this title box up here that Nintendo Switch Joy-Con coloration, this vibrant blue color here. And so I'm going to right click here, format title, shading. I've already got this color programmed in. Let me just make sure that's the right color. 06BADD, and that's 06BADD. All right, so that's looking perfect. We'll make this, we're gonna make this white and bold, and it's gonna be Tableau medium. All right, so Tableau medium, strongest performers. We're going to remove that. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert that into a bar graph form. I don't like how we have a scale from 0 to 9. It's going to make it hard to really see the distance between those bars. So I'm going to edit that access. I'm going to remove this include 0. Now, so you don't want to lie with your bar graphs. You want to make sure that you're not deceiving people. But in this case, you know, we really want to show the difference. We do want to emphasize that difference between Breath of the Wild and, you know, the Fire Emblem Three Houses. We still know that this is the strongest performers, so I don't think it's going to be too deceptive to really emphasize the distance between the top game and the bottom game. So in this case, I think it's fine to keep this 0 not included in the axis. So I'm going to just go ahead and remove that, and I'm going to hide this, and I'm going to pull in the labels of the rating so that we can see that and we don't even need the axis. So now that we've done that, I'm going to right click on rating, Actually, no, I'm going to go to, let's see here, format. I'm going to go to number custom, and I will remove that second decimal place so that we only have one decimal point. All right, so strongest performers, it's looking a little bland as far as the gradient goes. So we need to make that look a little bit more interesting. I'm dragging the rating to make that drive the coloration here, but I want it to retain that switch look. Like the coloration that we have over here looks very much like a Nintendo Switch Joy-Con or something like that. And it looks like I used this one here, this 0885A5. So I'm going to jump out of the finished dashboard into the one that I'm building. And yeah, that's coming from this color right here. All right, so let's go back in here. I'm going to click on this. I'm going to paste that in, and I'm going to drag this in as its own color so that we can retrieve it more quickly next time if we need it. Apply that. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. It's looking like the switch colors. So we'll go back to our dashboard and we'll pull in our creation, the strongest performers for the Nintendo Switch. I'm gonna remove that legend there because I don't think we really need it. I'm gonna squish this a little bit. Let's make this fit the width. Or maybe the entire view would be better. And we can play with the spacing later. What I like to do with these too is I like to introduce some band formatting. So right click here, format, go to this paint bucket up here, and we're going to do row banding. So we're going to do it for the header, but we're not going to do that for the pane. I don't want that for the pane, so I'm going to remove that. And there's still this ugly white space and these grid lines that we don't want. So right click here, format. Let's see, the grid lines, that should be in the column. I'm going to remove that. I'm going to jump back into this and right click and format again. Go to the paint bucket. We're going to go to the sheet and we're going to say none for the background, and hopefully that blends in. So yeah, now it's blending in with the color of the dashboard, but we still have this ugly white axis line that I don't like. So I'm going to format that. I'm going to go here to this grid, and I'm going to go to, actually it might not be there. It's actually in this section here for the axis ticks. So rows, we're going to remove the axis ticks, and we're going to remove the axis rulers. All right. Oh, what happened to this row banding? I guess I'm going to have to do that again. So go to the paint bucket. What just happened? I do not see this thing anymore. Okay, so I see it there. I guess the gray color wasn't dark enough, so let's remove that from the pane. Okay, that's looking good. I might make this text on the on these video games pop out a little bit more by giving it a little bit of a darker color. All right, so that's looking good. Let's slide this a little bit. I'm gonna expand the width of the title so that more of that name appears. Now that we've built this, we can pretty much put it on the fast track for the weakest performers and just duplicate this. So let's just do that. Let's duplicate it. We'll call it weakest performers. And we're gonna do the same thing again where we just color the title, but this time we're gonna give it that red color. So right click here, format title, go to shading, more colors. We're just gonna pull this color right here that we saved to custom colors. So now what we need to do is we need to go back to this ranking. I'm gonna edit this. Let's see, so how would we do this? So we need to pull the bottom 10. We need to pull the bottom 10 games that had at least 200 votes. So let's think about this. I think what I might do here is I might go back to this this ranking. I'm gonna hold down the control key I'm going to drag this right next door. I'm going to make this discrete. And then I'm going to go to my table calculation. I'm going to go back to ranking. And this time, instead of descending, I'm going to make it ascending. And it's going to be unique. I'm going to pull off this thing so that we've got all these things here. I'm going to bring this in, and now I guess I will bring in the 10 things that are actually the bottom 10 things. We reverse the order so that the ranking is going from bottom to top, and we're looking at the bottom 10 games. And how I like to set this up is I like to put this in ascending order. So I'll make it look like that. So the worst game shows up at the top now, followed by Mario Kart Live Home Circuit, followed by these other games. And just in case you're curious, I'll show you what that ranking looks like right next to it. So although it says first, it's actually like first worst is how you can interpret that, followed by second worst. So let's drag that off, and let's apply that warm coloration now to this bar graph. So I'm going to click here to edit colors, and for this custom sequential, we're going to use, again, this warm color here. And look at that, that looks pretty cool. Let's see how that looks when we drag it onto the dashboard. So I'll drag this here, weakest performers. Again, we'll remove this thing here. And then I'm going to put a space right here to just kind of see how that's looking once we decide to put in the publisher data. I'm going to just flip back to the first dashboard that is already finished. So next part of this is going to be building this thing here. So I just want to make sure I've got enough space for these things. It's looking like I'm going to have to play around with this a little bit. That's going to be the entire view. This is going to be the entire view. Okay, maybe I'll push this up a little bit. And then let's see here, I'm gonna drag that over to give those bars a little bit more space. We'll push that out a little bit. We'll drag that in. So we can mess around with this later to get it just right, but you know, this is the general idea. Okay, so next we're going to, like I said, we're going to build this quality of frequent publishers. So to do that, let's build another sheet. We'll call it quality of frequent publishers. All right. And now what we're going to do is we're going to pull in publisher for the rows. And I'm going to count out the titles that each publisher published. There's the count. Let's drag it there. Let's sort it from top to bottom, descending order. As expected, Nintendo's at the top. Haven't heard of NIS America, Bandai, Namco, and we got some other ones here. What I did in the finished version is I actually set this up so that we're looking at the top publishers that had at least 10 games that they published. So I'm going to hold down the control key and pull that into filters. And actually, let me just do, no, that's not what we'll do. Count. So we want the count to be at least 10. At least 10. Now let's go up here. And let's see, it's not giving me an oh, here we go. Here's the option for the bubbles. It's giving me discrete coloration here, which I don't like. So I'm going to drag that off, hold down the control key, and I drag that count of the title to the color, so it gives me a gradient effect again. Okay, so that's looking good. And actually, I've changed my mind. I do not want the color to be proportional to the number of titles that was published. I want that to be based off of the rating. All right, so, and then let's look at a diverging color so that it gives a warm coloration for those that score below the average and a cool coloration for those that are above the average. So we're going to pull in our blue color for the cool. Actually, no, we want this warm and then this to be cool on this side. And let's see, it's summing up the ratings, but what we really want it to do is take the average. So I'm going to right click on the sum of the rating and I'm going to go to average. Okay, so Nintendo is looking pretty good. Then you've got outright games as one of the worst. Merge games is like the next worst. I'm surprised that Square Enix is a little bit below the average, but oh well. So let's go in and pull in our new visualization here. Quality of frequent publishers, let's make that 8, a font of 8. Well, it's a little too small, so maybe we'll make it 10. All right, 9, we'll make it 9. And then Tableau medium, apply. We'll make that a middle gray color. This thing, I'm going to right click. I don't want this to have this ugly white background. So I'm going to click on that paint bucket. I'm going to go to sheet. I'm going to make sure that that doesn't have any background color at all. It just blends right in. Okay, so looking good. Let's distribute this evenly. All right, so that's looking good. I need to get this thing right here. There's a lot of stuff that's competing for space. Let's reduce the font size of these titles just so that there's plenty of space for everything. Okay, so that's good. All right, so for the last part of this, we're going to want to do a couple things. We're going to want to have this changing picture. So you click on these things and the picture is going to change. And then we're also going to want to have this donut chart and the number of reviews and the relevant information about that game. So we're going to do that next. So let's start with the donut chart. The donut chart is kind of a pain to build. There's a series of steps that we're going to have to follow. It's not fun to build, so let's just get that one out of the way right now. So the donut chart, we're going to have to build a calculation here. I'm going to right click, create calculated field. I'm going to call this delta donut. What we need to do is we need to consider the rating. So the rating is at most a 10. What we need to do is we need to create this little slice that shows up when you subtract the score from that maximum rating of 10. So 10 rating. If this doesn't make a lot of sense now, that's okay. I'm going to have a separate video on this, but I won't bother with the nitty-gritty details here. But this is just going to create some of our slices, as we'll see in a second here. So let's set this to pi. Okay, so we're setting this to pi. We're going to drag measure values to the angle, and I'm going to drag measure names up here. And then we're just going to unselect everything except for delta donut and the rating. Okay, so next we're going to drag measure values to color. Let's see. We need to create a placeholder. And what this is going to do is it's going to set this axis to 0, and it's going to allow us to create 2 axes so that we can have one bigger circle engulfing the smaller one. So we'll do the dual axis here. I'm trying to think of if there's anything else I'm forgetting. Maybe I'll put detail there. And then we'll drag off this thing and the colors, and then reduce that size. Now we're starting to see this donut chart here. So that's a lot of steps. It's a lot to memorize. It's kind of a pain to build. So now that we've got that circle there, I'm going to color this dark color because it's going to be against a black background when we drag it onto the switch. This coloration here, I'm going to make that more consistent with our Nintendo Switch colors. So that's going to be a custom diverging with this salmon color on the left and this water blue color on the right to give us that switch color. Next, I'm going to pull in the rating right here in the center. So I'm going to go to label on this axis. It's showing up on both slices because there's this detail thing here for measure values, which I'm going to pull off. Now it's forced to go into the center. But we don't want this to show as our rating. We want the average of all those ratings rather than the count or the addition of all those ratings that we're seeing for all those games. And there's too many decimal places, so I'll format this to be 1 decimal point. Let's blow this up a little bit by dragging this out. I don't want to see this header or this header. Actually, let's see here. There we go. All right, so that's looking better. That font is a little tiny, so let's go into the label. Blow this up to 24, bold, Tableau medium, apply, and that's looking good. So okay, so now that that's built, I'm just going to call this Doughnut Chart, and so now we can move on to the next thing. So the next thing we need to do is I'm going to flip back to our finished product, and I want to build this this image and have it change when you click on each of these games. So there's a series of steps we're going to need to follow for that, but it's pretty easy. So first thing we want to do is think about what we're doing. We're going to have this web page that we're going to drive into this switch here, and that web page is going to retrieve a URL from our data. So there's actually a column that stores this image URL, and it's going to change whenever we click on one of these things. To put the pieces into place, what I first need to do is I need to put this image URL somewhere on this visualization so that when we add that web object, it's going to see that there's an optional field that it can select from. I don't want to put it on detail though, because it's going to pull in all this stuff here. So I'm going to put that on tooltip, just someplace where it can't really affect things. I'm going to go to weakest performers, and I'm also going to drag image URL to tooltip. I'm going to go back to our dashboard. I'm going to pull in this web page object, and I'm just going to leave that blank for now. Click on the arrow, add URL action, unselect this stuff, and now we're going to click weakest performers, strongest performers. We're going to select. We're going to pull in that image URL here. I think that's everything. Let me just, I've got another one I think I was building earlier, but let's try this out. Okay, so now that's looking good. Yeah, it's functioning just as I would expect it to. So let's pull that in. Okay, right, so now that that's built, now let's see what else we got. We've got this thing here, which is the title and some relevant information about the game, like when it was released and who published it and what genre is it. We've got the number of reviews here. These are all floating objects. So we're going to build these things. We're going to make them float, just like we did for this thing here. This, by the way, this is a floating object if I hadn't mentioned that already. And to access that, you click on this floating thing here, and that's going to give you the option to like just drag stuff onto the dashboard wherever you want, just kind of like that. Okay, so let's build our next thing. We're going to have that narrative about the game. So let's pick the title here, or actually let's drag the title here. I'm just going to pick one for now, and we'll have a dynamic filter that affects all of this later. But let's see, let's just say Breath of the Wild. Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. We don't need this title here, so I'm going to hide that. We're going to go to text. So we've got our title. Maybe I'll make that like a size 12. Tableau, medium, bold, make that white. And let's see, it's hard to see because I made it white. We're eventually going to want that font to be white, but for now we want to be able to read this, so I'll just put that in for now. Let's see, what else do we need? We need the release date, so I'll pull that into the text. Okay, so that's looking good, but I want this all centered. I'm not sure why that's not centering. Oh, maybe it's here. Okay, there we go. And well, I'll just preface this by saying release. Date of release. And the publisher, so you drag that over here next. I think I pulled the wrong thing. Publisher is right here. So we go there. We'll put publisher right there. Okay. Let's go ahead and see how that looks. Might be competing for space a little bit, so we'll just play around with the sizing later, but let's see if we can fit the width here. Drag this down a little bit. That ain't looking too bad. But of course we need to make that blend in with the dark background here. Let's maybe make this completely black. And then we'll go back in to our font here. And we'll make that all white. Want the title, okay, the title is bold. Let's make everything bold actually. Okay. All right, so that's starting to look pretty good. Let's drag in our Doughnut chart and see how that looks. That also needs to be formatted to have a black background. And there's this ugly 0 line that we need to get rid of. So I'm going to right click that. And let's see if I can remember where that is. You go here to this line section. And let's just remove the 0 lines from there. I don't need this title, so I'll get rid of that. We'll drag that down like so. Let's see. So that font size is actually a little too big, so I'm going to scale that down a little bit. So the label, click here, make that like maybe an 18. Okay, better. I don't like this, these lines that are appearing. I don't like the grid lines, so let's see, is that it? No, we need to go to the, let's see here. Oh, it's the row divider and the column divider, those white lines that are appearing that we're boxing in that Doughnut chart. So I've gotten rid of those. Okay, and then we don't need this legend. Right, so the last thing that we need to build into this are just the number of reviews. That's going to be similar enough to this thing here. So let's duplicate this, and this should be game info is what I'll call that, game info. Number reviews is what I'll call this. Let's just pull in, or I keep calling it number of reviews, but I guess it's number of votes is what it's called in the data set. So let's pull that into the title here. We'll get rid of everything and we'll say reviews. Reviews. All right. Okay. Maybe I'll blow this up a little bit more. And then make that Tableau medium. Reviews, okay. All right, so let's pull that in now, also as a floating object. remove that, that title there, make that fit the entire view, reduce that size a little bit, and I'll put that right there. Okay, so I'm going to click on this. I'm going to click on this Use as Filter button, but I don't want that to affect my time scale up here, or my timeline, or the weakest performers over here. Now when you click on this thing, it actually creates what's called an action. All right, so this action is what we want to tweak here. So I'm going to go to this filter action. I'm going to edit this. I only want strongest performers and weakest performers to affect game info. I want it to affect game info in the Doughnut chart, and that should take care of that problem. So we go here, that changes now. This is still getting affected for some reason though, so why is that? Let's see. Game info, okay, so we don't want this and that or that to be affected. Okay, so it was hiding. We click that, that gets affected. We click this, that gets affected. We click that, that gets affected. But the reviews isn't changing. Okay, so now why is that? Okay, so I guess I didn't select all of these actions, so let me go back here, edit this. Oh, number of reviews, so we have to select that one as well. So in summary, this action, what it is doing is it's collecting information from strongest performers and weakest performers on the select. You click that, it says, okay, I'm going to feed that information into Doughnut Chart, game info, and number of reviews. I'm going to affect, I'm going to filter to that title onto these things as well. It's going to project that filter to those. And the same thing is going to happen with weakest performers. So now you're enabling any of these bars to power the narrative information here, the rating, the number of reviews. So one thing that I just noticed is that when you unclick the thing you have selected, it gives you this other information for a different game. We're going to fix that by going to Dashboard Actions. I'm going to go back to my action filter, and there's an option right here where it says querying the selection will show all values. We don't want to show all values, we want to keep the filtered values. So we do that, click OK, and now when I do this and I unselect, it should keep that information. So we fixed that. Next, we're going to want to center this and do a little bit more formatting. So I'll center that. I'll blow this up a little bit, make it look a little bit nicer. For this bubble chart, what I want to do is I want to actually make this in descending order. And you see that these good publishers are actually going to get centralized towards the middle here. Okay, so that looks a little bit better. I want to create a better tooltip for this. So for that, let's see, publisher is good, average rating is good, but I want to make that label a little bit nicer. So average review score is what I'll call that, average review score. And then count of title, 75. Okay, so I'll say count of released titles. And then down below I'll have some kind of disclaimer like publishers must have had at least 10 games that they published, must have published at least 10 games. Size of bubble is proportional to games published. Cooler colors denote better than average review score. Warmer colors denote worse than average review score, or something like that, okay? And that's a little too bold, so I'll unbold this. make this a little bit more washed out. That looks good. All right, how are we doing? So we've got, this is reorganized. I like how that looks. I'm gonna center this. I'm gonna center this. Maybe I'll, yeah, that looks pretty good actually. So I'm actually gonna fit the width here instead of the entire view so it moves up the bars a little bit. Okay. All right, so let's take a look at that. So yeah, it's looking all right. Oh, and then the tooltip here, I think this will be the final thing that will wrap this all up. We just need to have better tooltips for this. I'm going to switch over to the other finished dashboard and show you what that looks like. You have these, the good, strongest performers in blue for the title. You have the rating, and I need to put in the number of reviews for this one because it just shows the rating right now. Then it has the reviewer conclusion and then a little disclaimer below that says the bar chart defaults to selecting the top 10 titles. Game must have had at least 200 reviews. So we'll do that and then we'll be done. So I'm gonna go here to start things off. Let's get rid of the title label and blow this up a little bit. Maybe a size of 15, make that bold. We'll give it this Nintendo Switch blue color. And again, I like Tableau medium, so I'm gonna do that. All right, Tableau medium. We do not need the image URL to be displayed in the tooltip itself. Rating is looking good. Let's see, so now we need the number of votes. I'll drag that to tooltip. Votes. Let's see, this is needs to be a little bit lighter. And that color isn't matched with that one. That one's close enough. Okay. Votes. We'll pull down the number of votes here. Okay. We need to pull in the reviewer conclusion, so I'll drag that to tooltip. Let's see, reviewer conclusion. That's good. And then finally this disclaimer that says strongest performers only looks at games with at least 200 reviews. It pulls the top 10 of these titles. We're going to copy all this and so that it'll be easier to set all of that up in the weakest performers. So let's do that. But now we need to make this a warmer color, that Nintendo Switch red that we have. We need to pull in the number of votes to the tooltip. So I'll do that now. Review conclusion, we'll do that. It's still not, oh, here we go, okay. All right, so let's take a step back and just see how everything's coming along. You know, I think it's done. I think we're finally done. That was a lot of work, but I think this is definitely going to be worth it if you take the time to build all these pieces and put it on your Tableau public profile. This is something that can really impress recruiters or prospective employers. If you can put something like this together, you can do just about anything in Tableau. Well, that's all I have for you today. Leave any questions, comments, concerns down below if you have any. Hit that like and subscribe button if you want to see more content in the future. I'm going to have so much more coming up, and I'll see you in another video.